single most important thing we can do is to make sure we've got a world-class education system for everybody. That is a prerequisite for prosperity. It is an obligation that we have for the next generation.
What can transform the lives of millions of children around the world? How can we grow economies, build enterprises, and create futures? Where can we find the answers to our most complex problems? Education. Education allows us to harness the world's most valuable resource, youth.
Good day everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our presentation. I, Beviana Justin, together with my group member, Ashwellther, Esther, Rhozielia and Nabil will enlighten you on the fourth SDG, which is quality education. As future educator, we can integrate most of the SDGs into our teaching and learning, but the nearest to our field is quality education. So stay put, future teachers, for more interesting info. Education is a human right, and every goal in SDG requires education to empower people with the knowledge, skills and values to live in dignity, build their lives and contribute to their societies. Over the past decade, there have been major progress in increasing access to education and school enrollment rates at all levels, particularly for girls. Nevertheless, there are still numbers about 260 million children that were still out of school in 2018, which is nearly 1/5 of the population in that age group across the globe. Not only that, there are more than half of all children and adolescents worldwide that does not meet the minimum proficiency standards in reading and mathematics. This is a big issue because in a world of artificial intelligence, there are still people who can't read and count. Nevertheless, the progress in education across the globe still increased even though the pace was slow. However, just when we start to have progress, COVID-19 appeared, which causes pandemic and the world's lockdown.
Hello, my name is Coronavirus. I'm sure you've heard my name before. When I make someone feel sick, they have a disease called COVID-19. I'm all over the news and social media at the moment. It's important.
Prevention. School closures kept 90% of students out of schools, reversing years of progress on education. Why? This is because of the income gap, the finance, where the lower income families couldn't afford the technological tools and internet connection which is vital for them to join the class. This is also becoming a very huge problem as remote learning or RDL remains out of reach for at least 500 million students. Now, more than ever, we must stand together and contribute in any ways we can to cash back the progress we've made before. And it starts with understanding what is quality education. So SDG for Quality Education aims to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Ultimately, the goal of the SDG according to United Nations Development Programme in Malaysia 2021 is to ensure that all girls and boys complete free primary and secondary schooling by 2030. It also aims to provide equal access to affordable vocational training to eliminate gender and wealth disparities and achieve universal access to a quality higher education. Here are facts and figures of the progress of the SDG, which is retrieved from the UNDP in Malaysia 2021. The enrollment in primary education in developing countries has reached 91%. However, still 57 million primary-aged children remain out of school, and more than half of these numbers are children in sub-Saharan Africa. In developing countries, 1 in 4 girls is not in school, and about half of all out-of-school children in primary school age live in conflict-affected areas. 103 youth worldwide lack basic literary skills, and more than 60% of them are women. Finally, 6 out of 10 children and adolescents are not achieving a minimum level of proficiency in reading and math. Again, why does education matters? This is because education enables upward socio-economic mobility and is the key to escaping poverty. Education is not a food, not a shelter, not a safety tool, but it is channel to get all of that. Next, it helps reduce inequalities and reach gender equality. Education is crucial to fostering tolerance and more peaceful societies. Globally in 2018, 5.5 million more girls compared to boys of primary school age are out of school. Quality education seeks to reduce this large gap. This brings us to the objectives of the SDG. As have been explained before, these SDG seeks to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. The second objective is to reduce disparities and inequities in education, both in terms of access and quality. It also recognizes the need to provide quality education for all, and especially vulnerable population, including poor children, children living in rural areas, persons with disabilities, indigenous people, and refugee children. These objectives are supported by 10 targets. Each target has specific goals. The goal for Target 4.1 is free primary and secondary education for everyone. Target 4.2 aims to give equal access to pre-primary education. And Target 4.3 aims to give equal access to affordable technical, vocational, and higher education. The goal for Target 4.4 is to increase the number of people with relevant skills for financial success. Target 4.5 aims to eliminate all discrimination in education. Target 4.6 aims for universal literacy and numeracy. Next, the goal for Target 4.7 is education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Target 4A aims to build and upgrade inclusive and safe school. Target 4B aims to expand higher education scholarship for developing countries. Target 4C aims to increase the supply of qualified teachers in developing countries. Now, these 10 targets are further broken down to more specific details. My friend Esther will further enlighten you on the targets for SDG 4 quality education. And this is the end of the line for me, and stay put for more interesting info, everyone. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I'm Esther Victoria James and I'll be presenting on Target Group for SDG 4. In SDG 4, there are 10 global targets and 11 global indicators altogether. The targets specify the goals, whereas the indicators represent the metrics by which the world aims to track whether these targets are achieved. We are going to look at each target and indicator and the data from our country in the past years for each target and indicator. The UN defines Target 4.1 as to ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes by 2030. This can be measured with Indicator 4.1.1, the proportion of children and young people in grades 2 or 3, at the end of primary and at the end of lower secondary achieving at least a minimum proficiency level in reading and mathematics by sex. The data provided by UNESCO Institutes of Statistics shows that in 2019, only 58% of Malaysian pupils, both male and female, achieved at least a minimum proficiency level in reading at the end of their primary education. In the same year, only 64% of Malaysian pupils, both male and female, achieved at least a minimum proficiency level in mathematics at the end of their primary education. The next target is to ensure that all girls and boys have access to quality early childhood development, care and pre-primary education so that they are ready for primary education by 2030. This can be measured by the proportion of children aged 24 to 59 months who are developmentally on track in health, learning and psychosocial well-being by sex. The proportion of Asian children under 5 years of age who are developmentally on track in 2016 are more than 70% as shown on the map. Unfortunately, no data is provided for Malaysia. Moving on to the next indicator for target 4.2, which is the participation rate in organized learning 1 year before the official primary entry age by sex. I have selected the data for 3 ASEAN countries to compare: Brunei, Malaysia and Indonesia. The data shows that Malaysia is on par with the neighboring countries with a participation rate exceeding 95% from 2014 to 2016. No data was provided by United Nations Statistics Division for our country for the year 2017 to the present. The UN defines target 4.3 as by 2030 ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational and tertiary education including university. This is measured by the participation rate of youth and adults in formal and non-formal education and training in the previous 12 months by sex. As we can see from the chart, the trend for the enrollment ratio in tertiary education in Malaysia from 1979 to 2014 is increasing, which is a positive thing. Apart from that, another target of SDG 4 is by 2030 substantially increase the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills, for employment, decent jobs and entrepreneurship. This can be measured by the proportion of youth and adults with information and communications technology skills by type of skill. The data shows that only 25.9% of Malaysian youth have created electronic presentations with presentation software in 2019. The number is quite worrying because it's not even half of the proportion of youth and adults when 21st century education should supposedly improve learners' ICT skills and presentation skill. SDG 4 also seeks to eliminate gender disparities in education and ensure equal access to all levels of education and vocational training for the vulnerable, including persons with disabilities, indigenous people, and children in vulnerable situations by 2030. The chart shows the Gender Parity Index for participation rate in organized learning 1 year before the official primary entry age in 5 ASEAN countries. In Malaysia, there was a parity between genders from 2014 to 2015 as the Gender Parity Index for both years are 1.01. There is no data provided by United Nations Statistics Division for the country from 2016 onwards. In 2016 to 2018, Indonesia recorded a disparity in favor of females. The next target is to ensure that all youth and a substantial proportion of adults, both men and women, achieve literacy and numeracy by 2030. As can be seen in the chart provided by Our World in Data in 2018, the youth literacy rate between male and female in Malaysia shows an increasing trend between 1980 to 2015. Target 4.7 is a special one because it aims to ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship and appreciation of cultural diversity, and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. Hence, this target seeks to teach the citizens of all the other sustainable development goals, whether in the national education, the curricula, the teacher education, and through student assessment. However, because the target is so broad, there is currently no data in the United Nations Statistics Division database as of the year 2021. Indicator 4.8.1 is the proportion of schools offering basic services by type of service. In 2018, more than 95% of the proportion of schools in Malaysia had access to electricity. In the same year, the proportion of lower secondary schools in Malaysia with access to computers and internet for pedagogical purposes is 93% and 98.4% respectively. However, I believe the number is much lower in rural areas in Sabah and Sarawak due to geographical factor and lack of resources. Target 4.b has a target year of 2020, unlike most SDG targets which are set to be achieved by 2030. Indicator 4.b.1 is the volume of official development assistance flows for scholarships by sector and type of study. From the chart on the right, Malaysian government recorded one of the highest expenditures on education from 1960 to 2010. Finally is target 4.c, which I believe is one of the most important targets because it emphasizes the educators. Indicator 4.c.1 is the proportion of teachers in pre-primary, primary, lower secondary and upper secondary education who have received at least the minimum organized teacher training, pre-service or in-service required for teaching at the relevant level in a given country. The progress bars show that the proportion of Malaysian teachers with the minimum required qualification in primary education is 97.3%, whereas the proportion of Malaysian teachers with the minimum required qualification in secondary education is 93.4%. In my opinion, this is a fantastic number because it means that our educators are the top in their field. I think that should be it for my part. I have shared a lot on where we currently stand and where we should be heading in the next 9 years before 2030. I bid farewell to all of you as I pass this presentation to Ashwellther. Stay safe and take care.
Hello everyone, I'm Ash and I'm going to talk about the activities, program and strategies on SDG 4, Quality Education. This subtopic will be divided into 3 contexts, which are global context, Malaysian government context, and Malaysian society context. So, without further ado, let's take a look on the first part, global context. As one of the global associations that specifically tend to children needs worldwide, United Nations Children's Fund or UNICEF proposed 3 strategies in order to achieve better quality in terms of education. The first strategy is equitable access to learning opportunities. So these strategies emphasize to provide better education access to children, specifically to those who are neglected due to gender inequalities, disabilities, poverty, and ethnicity. The second strategy is to improve learning and skills for all. This strategy emphasizes to increase support for children's learning journey, specifically early years learner aged 3 to 5 and adolescent learners aged 14 to 19. And the third strategy is to improve learning and protection for children in emergencies and fragile contexts. These strategies emphasize to improve the learning condition and enhance protection for children who are refugees, suffer from disabilities, segregated due to gender and ethnicity, and also children in extremely remote areas. In order to achieve the 3 strategies as mentioned before, UNICEF also proposed 6 approaches that can be used as a guidelines. The first approach is system strengthening. UNICEF aims to work together with the government and other NGOs in order to provide, improve, and strengthen the educational system in a country, thus making sure that the system is reliable and can be used for all. The second approach is data and evidence. Among the aim of this approach is to enhance the process of data collection and processing. This is to ensure that there are no children left behind in terms of education, and also to help to keep the current education system to be up to date. The third approach is innovation. This approach is to ensure that the government always prepare to provide and accept other learning method that does not restricted within a classroom. For example, our current method of learning, which is online distance learning, also known as ODL. As for the other three strategies, which are communication and advocacy, community engagement, and service delivery, this three approach aims to create and enhance cooperation between countries, associations, and societies in order to provide better education, especially for children. Now, let's minimize our scope and take a look on general support that are provided by the Malaysian government in order to achieve better quality in terms of education. It is undeniable that Malaysian government has put a lot of money and effort in order to provide us with better education and better educational system. So these are the four efforts among them. First is free education for all Malaysian citizens. From the age of 7 to 17, all Malaysian children have the privilege to enroll in a public Malaysian school with only little to no amount at all. Second, Malaysian government cater to the special needs children by providing them with their own curriculum and facilities. Through this, special needs children are not left behind in terms of education. Next is the Bantuan Kumpulan Wang Pelajar Miskin or KUAM for Malaysian students who live in poverty. Through this support, primary school students will get 100 ringgit annually, and secondary school students will get 150 ringgit annually. Although it doesn't seem much, there are also other financial support which are distributed by each state government. Next, in response to the UNICEF strategies and approaches, Malaysian government also set up our own educational system. Education Management Information System or EMIS is a system that allows the government to collect data from all public schools in Malaysia, thus making it easier to keep track of every public school and keeping them up to date. As our world is hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, new norms have been practiced and new strategy has been applied in order to maintain education. And for post-COVID-19, Malaysian government has agreed to enforce learning via online method. Online distance learning or ODL has been a method to deliver education should the school is closed due to lockdown or COVID-19 infection. In order to ensure that all students have the chance to participate in an online learning session, Malaysian government has also distributed a few series of financial support such as the Bantuan Prihatin Rakyat, where students get 300 ringgit worth of smart device such as smartphone or tablet. There are many more ongoing efforts which are yet to be done by the government in terms of educational and financial support. These are only a few forms of many efforts that are provided by the Malaysian government in order to achieve better education as stated in SDG 4. Also, there are many more efforts which are not mentioned due to time constraints. Moving on, now let's take a look on what we personally can do in order to provide the society with better education. First, we can volunteer to join the community program in order to help the one in need. NGOs such as United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees or UNHCR in Malaysia has a few educational programs where everyone are welcome to participate. Their main goal is to give better education access to refugee children since they don't have the access to formal education here in Malaysia. Next, we could also help to raise funds and help rural children who live far away from schools. This idea has long been implemented since there are already a few non-governmental hostel buildings built by church and villages to help rural students in Borneo. However, it is still not enough, and there are still Malaysian children who does not have access to education due to geographical reasons. To sum up, the United Nations and our government has already shows their effort by giving strategies, instruction, and even aids in order to provide better education. It is now up to us as individuals to play our role in building better society where every children has access to better quality of education. I think that is all from me. My friend Rhozielia will continue on the implication of quality education. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, I'm Rhozielia Gudang and I'll present on the implication of the 4th Sustainable Development Goals, SDG for Quality Education. Taken from the United Nations, Sustainable Development Goals addresses the challenges that we face in terms of poverty, inequalities, climate change, environmental degradation, peace and justice. It is an action to tackle challenges faced by the people all around the world and are the blueprint to achieve a better and a sustainable future for all. How long will it take to make sure all of the SDGs to be achieved? The SDGs that were set up are intended to be achieved by the year of 2013. Now, the question is, will it be possible for the SDGs to be achieved by the year of 2030? Like any other actions and goals, the SDGs will be having both short and long-term effect. According to Cambridge Dictionary, short-term means continuing or having an effect for a short period of time in the future. So, the short-term implication for the 4th SDG aims to improve the physical quality of schools in terms of facilities, systems, and administration. While long-term means happening, existing, or continuing for many years or far into the future. On that account, quality education in the long term aims to open more opportunities for learning for all regardless of who they are, increase motivation and improve achievement, and support students' holistic development, potentials, and talents. Again, will it be possible to achieve the SDGs by the year of 2030 during these hard times while we are battling with the COVID-19? The situation is no longer the same. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed our life drastically. Therefore, changes have to be made according to the current situation, and the actions to fulfill the SDGs needs to be revised. We cannot ignore the fact that more needs to be done during this pandemic, but looking back to before COVID-19, the progress towards inclusive and equitable quality education was already slow and insufficient to reach the SDG education targets. As we can see in the illustration, it is stated that over 200 million children will still be out of school in 2030. Another evidence is that in the end of 2019, many were still out of school and more than half of the students were still not meeting the minimum proficiency standard in reading and numeracy. Taking into consideration of the short-term effect, the data taken between 2017 and 2019, globally, it is observed that more than a fifth of primary schools do not have the access to drinking water, and more than a third do not have basic hand washing facilities. Also, not to be forgotten, the most common issue up till now, the limited access to electricity and the availability of the internet and computers for teaching and learning purposes. As a result, the decade of action was made and launched to strengthen, speed up the progress, and deliver the goals by 2030. So at this point in the year of 2021, along with coronavirus crisis, do you think it will still be possible and will be a smooth sailing journey to achieve the SDGs goals? It is undeniably worrying to see the increasing cases of COVID-19, and it affected the lives of people all around the world, regardless of their gender, age, race, religion, and background. So, looking at the educational context, the temporary closure of school has impacted more than 91% of students worldwide. We are shifting from the physical face-to-face class to open distance learning, or in short ODL. Even if it has been more than a year, we are still adjusting and adapting to the new norm. Have a look at the illustration above. It says school closures kept 90% of all students out of school, reversing years of progress on education. The new norm caused by the COVID-19 made children and youth to fall behind in their learning, which impact their education, well-being, social and behavioral development. Learning losses, decreasing of motivation, and the growth in school completion rates may slow down or even reverse depending on the duration of school closures. We can hypothesize that the longer the school closes, the lower the students' academic performance and motivation to learn. Besides, in 2020, early education facilities and primary school closed in most countries, so it prevents or limits the access to education, especially for children who come from low and middle income countries. So this makes 2 in 3 students worldwide are still affected by full or partial school closures. Other than that, inequalities in education existed and became worse due to COVID-19. Remote learning remains out of reach for at least 500 million students, which consists mostly the underprivileged and low and middle income households, and only 65% of primary schools have basic hand washing facilities critical for COVID-19 protection. It is also alarming to see and think of the disadvantaged ones, the most at risk and helpless children unable to access remote learning like online classes, having limited access to internet connection, electricity, facilities, and not conducive living and learning environment are at an increased risk of never returning to school, being forced into child marriage, or even child labor. According to the data taken from the United Nations, close to 1.6 billion children and youth were out of school, and nearly 369 million children who rely on school meals needed to look for other resources for daily nutrition. Other than that, 101 million of children and youth from grade 1 to 9 fell below the minimum reading proficiency level. Those from the poorest household and disadvantaged groups are less equipped to involve in the remote learning and more likely to drop out permanently or for extended period. This somehow could hinder the fulfillment of SDG 4. And then, for the teaching profession, a great number of teachers are trained in 2019. However, due to the pandemic, the teaching workforce was severely affected as well. Taken from pre-COVID data from 2012 until 2020, 76 countries and territories indicate that 7 out of 10 children aged 3 and 4 are developmentally on track with no contrariety by child sex, which is a good thing. But what about during and after COVID-19? Many young children who are unable to attend early childhood education due to school closure are now entirely reliant on their caregiver for nurturing care. So do you think they can be developmentally on track just like in 2019? Unsafe conditions, negative interaction, lack of support, and lack of educational opportunities are things to consider to make sure the children can be developmentally on track again. And what now? Will it still be possible for the SDG 4 to be achieved by the year of 2030 with the same strategy, or how should the action be revised? According to Montoya and Gustafsson on learning losers, they stated that recovery could occur by 2024, but only if exceptional efforts are devoted to the task through remedials and catch-up strategies. What are the remedials and strategies? To answer that question, my friend Muhammad Nabil will elaborate more on that, on how to promote SDG into school curriculum and activities. With that, I'll end my presentation here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rhozielia. So, hello everyone, I'm Muhammad Nabil. I will be continuing the presentation on the last topic, which is on education, how to promote quality education in school curriculum and activities. So for the first method that you can implement to promote quality education is that you can provide information to the teachers and parents on all of the available government fundings that are provided for the children. And you can do this by handing out brochures or pamphlets, or even pasting this information on the school information board. And this method is actually important in actually enlightening these teachers and parents, as some of these parents are quite unaware of these government fundings that they could provide for their children, that they could use to further their studies and also help in their studies itself. So to prove further on this, we can look at the study done by Ray in 2015, where they stated that families in which several members achieved success in the past tend to be more knowledgeable of how the system works, and they are more confident in navigating it and have experienced the benefits education can bring in terms of well-paid knowledge-intensive jobs. So, this means that if a certain family has achieved success in the past, it means that maybe in their family, some of their family members have achieved success, and they would know and they would have the knowledge on how these educational system works and how like previously the government fundings and how they could provide these government fundings for their children. And for these low income and families and all those families that are not well knowledge about how the system works and how these government fundings could help their children in furthering their studies, they wouldn't know how they could navigate it, how they could actually utilize it for their children. So it is important for us to actually give out this information and help them in knowing how to navigate these benefits that they could benefit for themselves and also for their children. Next, what we can do is we can conduct a workshop, and we can conduct these workshops for the teachers, for the parents, and also for the students. And these workshops we can actually cater the content towards all ages, so that the teachers, parents, and students will be able to understand and digest what they could get from the workshop itself. And these workshops could be used actually to give an insight to these people to actually know the importance of quality education and what is the goal, what is the target for quality education, and also like previously we could provide information on these government fundings that they could provide for their children and what the students could provide for themselves. And these workshops actually like for teachers, they can use it to actually educate their students on it, and if they follow this workshop, our parents would be able to know what they could do for the future of their children. And for the students, they would know their target, what they would want to do after they have finished their secondary school term, and what they would want to further their studies on the different fields in the future. Other than that, we can also implement the values of quality education in the school subjects itself. For example, fitting school subjects such as Pendidikan Civic and Pendidikan Moral. And by implementing it in the curriculum and also in the lesson itself, teachers could actually educate their students on the importance of quality education and how quality education is actually affecting themselves and the people around them, and how it's actually, for some families, they consider education as a privilege. So teachers could actually educate their students on those kinds of topics. And we can also create a school fund program for these low-income families in order to help them support even the most basic needs for their children's education. For example, their school attire or the stationeries that they need for certain subjects, and the books that they need for certain subjects. And other than that, like some activities that school is conducting, they need the fees for joining, and these school funds could actually provide them, and they could actually participate in these types of activities, because children sometimes, when they don't have certain facilities, then they don't have the privilege of joining certain activities, they would not be as interested in joining these types of lessons themselves. So it's actually important for them to have these kinds of basic needs in order to participate in this type of education. And lastly, the simplest thing that we can do to promote quality education is to firstly provide the sufficient facilities for each and every student in school. As we know earlier, it's actually important for them to have these sufficient facilities in order to participate in the lesson, and also to actually indulge in education itself. And it's actually important. What we can do is, for example, if a student doesn't have a particular book for a particular subject, we need to take the initiative to provide them the book that they need to actually follow the lesson. So that is all for the presentation. Thank you all for listening. See you all. Bye.